5, 6, 7, 8.
Hi EXers, welcome to the EX Podcast, episode number 74. This is your host, Stefan Vincent. HR is going through a radical shift the same way the marketing function was disrupted 15 years ago by data and digital transformation. As you may know, a Gallup report shows that only 30% of US employees feel engaged in their workplaces. Employee disengagement costs the US $450 to $550 billion annually. It's a fairly basic concept and we all get it. Engaged employees are good for business. But why aren't we acting on it? There's been a lot of focus over the past decade on the user experience and customer experience, and for good reasons. Yet, companies have failed to focus on their most important elements, their employees. And let's not forget that employees are the first ambassadors of a brand. The EX podcast brings a different lens to the employee experience, a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Leaders who don't care about their employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Jody Kohner, Senior Vice President of Employee Marketing and Engagement at Salesforce. Today with Jody we talk about what she brought from product marketing that she is now successfully applying to the employee side of marketing. What makes Salesforce's culture so distinctive? What role technology plays in the employee experience? And how Salesforce leverages employee data and automation to drive employee engagement. You can use the code EXI_EX Summit for a 20% discount to register for the EX Impact Conference in Orlando from February the 27th to March the 1st, a 3-day event of dialogue around the strategies for increasing engagement and empowering employees to feel more connected to their work. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jody, and because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next events, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. Alright, let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Jody Kohner. Jody is calling from San Francisco, and she is the Senior Vice President of Employee Marketing and Engagement at the company that you may know about, Salesforce. Jody, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Stefan.
Tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do exactly at Salesforce.
I've been in marketing for almost 20 years, at the risk of dating myself a bit, but I've been at Salesforce here for the last 7.5. And I started at Salesforce working on the product marketing side, where I worked on our competitive differentiation. So in that capacity, I used to work with the sales teams to help them understand what the best points of differentiation were in their toughest competes. And I also worked then collaboratively with the product teams to give them feedback about what we were hearing in these deals and what elements of our product were sticking and what weren't resonating as much. And it was really interesting when I was in this role that I realized how unbelievably passionate our employees really were about our company. And I was able to just witness firsthand the impact that had on all of our sales results. And it was sort of like there was this correlation between how unbelievably passionate they were and how great they did in attaining their goals. And that really kind of got my head spinning around a lot around this idea that having an engaged employee is not just a nice to have, but that is the true differentiator. That is what all customers want to be able to work with, really passionate, engaged people. So this got me thinking a lot about the intersection between what the company culture is and what the employee morale of a team is. And I kind of started tinkering with an idea of starting this new team, and really started socializing that and talking about it up through the management change, about the importance of really prioritizing the employee experience. And that today is the role of my team, to focus exclusively on our employees, because they are every bit as important to our business as our customers are. So that kind of landed me in employee marketing and engagement.
Before we talk a bit more about what is really Salesforce culture and its brands or employer brand attributes, let's talk a bit more about what are the things that you learned on the product marketing side that you were able to implement and apply to the employee marketing side, and what are maybe some of the differences in between product and employee marketing as well.
Yeah, no, I feel very passionately about this. This is a great question. So, coming from that product marketing background, that was really the whole lens that I had. That was my whole view of the world. And one of the things that stood out to me the most was the need to treat your employees the same way you treat your customers, right? To look at what is a traditional customer lifecycle marketing experience, and how does that change if you just swap out the customer and put the employee in the middle? And that's really how we have built this team, right? Is to think about every step of the journey an employee has at Salesforce. That is another opportunity to connect with them, right? If you think about it, someone who's been here for 1 year should have a completely different experience and should be communicated differently with than someone who's been here for 15 years. So when we really mapped out my team, we looked at creating a full life cycle journey. So that means it starts with building a solid employer brand to help us attract the best talent, and then working collaboratively with recruiting to make sure that we're developing a really tight, efficient, and memorable candidate experience. And once we do make the hire, my team focuses on global onboarding, on processes to help our new employees really adopt our culture early. And then, we really need to continue to work at that relationship and make sure they continue to feel really deeply engaged, whether that's through how we communicate in our internal communications team or our employee programs team that's just designing really fun and unique things that are distinctly Salesforce. And that also then bleeds into, similar as you would with a customer, what are our loyalty programs? What are our advocacy programs? What are we doing to really ensure that every single day an employee wakes up and is excited to come to Salesforce? So I would say would be the biggest kind of similarity between product marketing and where I sit today. I think the other thing, Stefan, that's really interesting and important, though, is any product marketer will know the importance of data, right? And you have to be able to come to the table with data. And I think that also has to translate to HR. Data is the language of the business, right? And actually, before I moved into this role, my mentor at the time was that was the one thing he was most nervous about for me, was well, what are your metrics going to be? What is the data around employee engagement? How do you prove that all of this is so important and it's working? And so that was very top of mind for me when we were really launching this. And we look very, very closely at all sorts of measurements to make sure we're showing up to that table well armed with data to say this is the ROI on these investments that we're making. So whether that's through employee surveys that are asking employees very specifically how well we're tracking against our goals and values, or whether that's through other accolades, like being named the great place to work, the best place to work in the world, different things like that we can all kind of bring together and use as a firm measurement of engagement.
One of the things that is really hard to measure in terms of engagement, and I think that the marketing side has sort of masters what engagement means. It's not just in terms of interaction with clicking and opening emails or clicking on content. It's really what are the conversions from first interactions to customers buying products, right? So on the employee side, how do you measure engagements beyond just surveys and opening a corporate newsletter or attending some of the staff meetings or things that you do at Salesforce? How do you measure further engagement down the road or down the funnel beyond just the typical surveys?
Well, I think that there's a couple of ways to look at that. First thing that I would say is when you look at engagement, what I always default to is the Gallup definition of an engaged employee. Mm-hmm. Right? That to me is kind of the standard universal one that we can all agree upon and work from. And that definition is, of course, that engaged employees feel a sense of passion for their work, and they spend their days driving innovation and moving their company forward. Right? And so when I think about how to measure it, you're right. It's far more than just clicking on emails. It's how do you show up? And what are you willing to do to go extra to get the job done right, not just get it done, right? So, for example, one of the questions that we ask on our employee survey is, are you willing to go extra to get the job done? And at Salesforce, 96% of employees respond, yes, they are. Now, for reference, that is 8 points higher than the Fortune 100 best companies to work for, right? So that's the best of the best. We're still 8 points higher than that. And I think,
impressive.
That's an example of kind of like a data point that you can't game, you can't mess around with. It's discretionary effort is kind of the hallmark of engagement. Other things that we can look at, attrition. We can look at employee referral rates. Certainly you don't refer someone into a company that you don't feel really passionately about. And so items like that all kind of, when you bring them together, tell a well-rounded story around engagement.
Do you also have metrics to measure the engagement against business performance? For instance, on the sales team, depending on how engaged salespeople are, how does it impact their sales performance? Or if it's the call center support team, how the level of engagement impacts their performance as well? Do you have any types of measurements there?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that there's a really good philosophy out there that we fully subscribe to. There's an author named Kevin Kruse. He wrote the book Engagement 2.0. And in that book, he really talks about how if you invest in the employee engagement, that it ultimately increases employee effort and productivity and retention. And those are the key components to driving customer success, right? Either through service, through satisfaction, through loyalty. And ultimately, that is what increases your financial performance and your impact. There is direct and real ROI from putting those first dollars into the employee experience and how it comes out, the funnel on the other side in terms of profitability. And so we do see that the most productive and engaged teams at Salesforce that those things are correlated. Productivity and engagement go hand in hand.
What type of roles and backgrounds do you find on your team? And just to have an idea for our listeners, what kind of responsibilities different people on your team may have?
Sure. So I have quite a few people with a marketing background, as you might imagine, because we do take a marketing first approach to engagement. So we have designers, we have copywriters, very important for all of our internal communications. We do use our own tools. So, for example, we've got an email technology and a web technology team that works on Marketing Cloud. So we've got some folks there. We also have social marketers for all of our recruitment marketing efforts, everything we're doing to go out there and be able to recruit great talent. We have an onboarding team, so people who are really well versed in presentations and very engaging and helping be that warm, welcoming voice and person on that first day and through that whole first year. That's a good sampling of them. We do a lot of work around our employer brand as well. So we've got people who are really dedicated to what how that experience goes on our social channels, whether it's responding to things on Glassdoor or submitting our entries for the Great Place to Work surveys. It's really, you can really go around the whole life cycle from branding through onboarding, communications, programs, design. We've got amazing event planners on our team. We like to throw great events for our employees. That has always proved to be successful with our customers. So again, if it's good for our customers, it's good for our employees. So we've got some employee event planners as well.
So Salesforce has been celebrated over the years for its very unique and well-identified culture. At a high level, can you explain us what makes Salesforce culture very, very unique and so distinctive?
Absolutely. I think we are so proud of the company that we've been able to build. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary next year. And when our founders started Salesforce, they were as intentional about the company culture that they wanted to create as they were about the products they wanted to build and how they wanted to go to market. Now, I want to be really, really clear here. Like, we do not have all of this figured out. We're very, very humbled to be named the world's best place to work 2 years in a row. But this is, we're working a formula. We're learning every day. And as our company continues to grow, we continue to evolve right alongside the employees that are coming in and helping us be so successful. The formula that we really think about when we're thinking about the overall culture strategy and our engagement strategy sounds kind of simple, but I think there's a lot of meat behind it. And that is culture plus technology plus data is what ultimately drives employee engagement. So let me break that down for you. When we think about culture, we think hands down that is our greatest differentiator. That is our competitive advantage. And so we are incredibly intentional about our culture. We write it down. We prioritize it. We build programs around it. We measure it. We are constantly innovating on it. This is not something that the HR team owns, right? It's something that everyone has to own. And all of that sounds really good, and you can get people, articulate about what you want your culture to stand for, and you can make really pretty plaques and things and put them on the walls. But, your culture has to be something people can interact with. It has to be something that they can feel and see and realize. And that's where we've found that technology comes in, because culture is not enough for today's employees. They also want social, mobile, smart, and connected technologies. They want it to mirror, what they're using in their everyday lives outside of work.
Yeah.
And technology becomes a really amazing catalyst for your culture. And it can be something that can really help bring your values to life and make it something that you can interact with and see and touch. And then the beauty of this, of course, is that when you really start thinking creatively about, what technologies are there that are out there that can help me bring this value to life? When you make that leap, then you get a ton of data. And the data is where all of the power is. The data is what helps us create even more employee-centered experiences. It helps us move faster. It makes us make smarter decisions. It helps us optimize the culture and be able to say, these parts of our culture are working and these parts are not. And so it's kind of those equal 3 parts, right? Culture, technology, data. Have the idea, articulate, align behind it, put some technology behind it to make it come to life, analyze the data, and continually optimize the experience. That is what drives engagement. And I think that is really unique, that strategy. And I think that is what makes our culture so distinctive, is that it's always evolving.
How many employees are there at Salesforce?
Oh, I think we're up at about 32,000 now.
And spread out across how many different locations and regions?
We are across the globe. You will find Salesforce not only in North America, but in EMEA, in Asia, in South America. We're or everywhere.
How do you create consistency across the employer branding and employer brand message, as well as the experience across all those different locations, all those different regions, as well as assume that you have some remote employees? How do you create that consistency across all the messages and the experience?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of different ways I can think about answering that. One is to, first of all, ensure that everyone is having a consistent onboarding experience, right? When you bring into the company needs to walk in through the same front doors, whether that's, from their work at home office or Tokyo or Indianapolis or wherever we might be. And so one of the functions of my team that I mentioned earlier is to run global onboarding. And we have a consistent program across the globe, no matter where you are. So that helps. I also think, going back to that formula we talked about, being really articulate about the culture is incredibly important. So, we really align around our 4 core values of trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. And we spend a lot of time ensuring that everyone understands how we define those, what are examples of those, how you're expected to uphold those, making sure there's technology there to help support them. And then everyone can kind of interact with those things. Now, an example of that might be how we communicate internally at Salesforce. I'm not going to say we don't use email, because we certainly do. But the vast majority of the conversations in Salesforce are happening in our own internal community. And now this is Chatter using our own communities product. And this creates a completely social and open environment where everyone has a voice in the conversation and everyone is participating in the conversation, not just the people who are on the email distribution list. You can imagine how important that is as someone who's coming into the company as a new hire, right? One of the first things that I tell people when they join my team is to go back into my team's group within Chatter, and read the last 6 months worth of posts, because I assure you that will help bring you up to speed on the whole all the conversations that are happening around the team. And I don't have to forward you 9,000 emails that you don't want to read anyway to figure out, what are the main drivers. So bringing everyone into the conversation and having a common community is really powerful for building consistency. But it also is another example of us putting that formula back into play, right? Because if we have a culture of trust and we use the technology to bring everyone together and to trust that it's okay to have a dissenting view and to, speak openly and freely, we're going to learn more about the company and the direction and our roles we play in it at a much faster rate.
So we talk more and more about data, automation, personalization of contents, and the experience. How do you guys leverage data, automation, technology to further drive employee engagement, but also to create those sort of personalized experiences?
This is a fantastic question, and you are spot on. If you think about today's workforce, they really expect the same consumer-focused experiences they receive in their personal lives that they get in their professional lives.
Yes.
Right? I mean, companies must learn new techniques and adopt technology to really help bridge this disconnect. When I think about, Stefan, the apps that are on my phone, right? I have apps on my phone of these brands that I just love. I love that they send me push notifications. I love that they remind me that great new shirt is sitting in an online shopping cart, right? And that I've forgotten to go get it. And I feel like they know me, and I am having this very personal relationship with them. But then what happens for most people is they go into work, the brand that they spend 40, 60, 80 hours a week with, and it's a completely disconnected experience where the companies aren't speaking to them on a one-to-one basis. They don't even seem to know who I am or what I need. So part of this problem comes from not having the modern tools for work that we do have in our personal lives. But another part of the problem is that companies are really behind when it comes to using the employee data in the same way that they do their customer data. Mm-hmm. So, we analyze our customer data down to the very smallest detail to maximize our customer relationships. Why are we not doing the same thing with employee data, right? Why are we not investing to really know who these people are that are driving this engine forward? And that is when, for us, we had this giant kind of critical epiphany, because we thought, oh my gosh, this same technology that is driving wonderful brand loyalty with our customers, this customer success platform of ours, my goodness, if you just flip that thing inside out and used all those same technologies internally, you could have the employee success platform. And that is really what we've done.
What's fascinating with Salesforce suite of products is that integrated approach between all the different components of sales and marketing and CRM, marketing automation, social media monitoring, and obviously data collection and data reporting. But many companies struggle, as you said, on the employee side. They sit on a bunch of data, but they don't necessarily know how to leverage it and where to start. What would be maybe one, two, or three recommendations that you could make for people listening to us today and say, where do I start by trying to put together a strategy around defining metrics and measurements and be able to implement this strategy?
So my biggest one would be to start where I think almost all companies are doing, but they're not doing well. And that would be start with your employee survey. So most companies are running an employee survey once, maybe twice a year. But what this looks like in most companies is it's an HR initiative, and they send it out, and then they circle back with the company with some report that says, here's the status quo. And then it sort of just sits on a shelf, and nothing ever really happens with it until 12 months later when they do another pulse to see if anything's moved, right? And that is just not an effective way to drive change. So what we do is very different, and I have to say is one of the things I'm most proud of. We run our survey twice a year, but we ask all sorts of core questions around the experience and how leadership is engaging, and transparency and whether we're living our values. So that's all kind of part and parcel. But what we do that's a little bit different is that when we get that data, we publish it into our Analytics Studio app, and we publish the whole thing out to the entire company. Now, this is robust data that you can click down in almost infinitely. So I can go to any other team across the globe, I can click into it, and I can see exactly what the employee surveys scores are for that team. This really, really kind of revolutionized and changed how we thought about culture at Salesforce, because there were some really big things that came out of this. First of all, we now were able to go through the entire company and identify great leaders, not just leaders who are like hitting their numbers or making all their quotas, but leaders who are inspiring, leaders who have passionate people on their teams who are having a great experience. Now, you don't want to be known as someone who is not a great leader in this company, right? You want to be able to look to your team's employee survey scores and show that you are someone who's really owning the culture, and you take personal responsibility for the experience everyone on your team is having, and knowing that that could also, influence your future mobility within the company. So that's been really great. But the other thing that's been really interesting about this is that people have now, within Salesforce, we're having this, unbelievable rocket ship kind of growth in this company, and that certainly creates a lot of internal mobility options. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is our employees now use this employee survey and this tool the same way candidates use Glassdoor, right? If somebody wants me to come and work on their team, the first thing I'm going to do is go look at their employee survey scores, and I'm going to see, well, what kind of experience is happening in there, right? This helps us live our value of transparency. And it also makes everyone accountable. It's not just, the employee survey isn't just an HR thing that, it's HR's job to go back and come up with some task force to try and fix, but it's everyone. Everyone personally owns their scores, and you're held accountable to it. So, if I was just starting off and looking for some way to, like, where do I start with the employee data? You're probably sitting on a mound of amazing data. You're just not disseminating it in a way that's going to be impactful and driving change.
Many companies are organized in silos. You may have HR on one side, you may have recruiting or talent acquisition on the other side, you may have marketing on another side as well. They don't actually work together. And sometimes there is a lack of consistency in the entire experience, from candidates to onboarding to actually working at the company, even maybe exiting the company. How does Salesforce operate to ensure that there's some sort of a level of consistency?
That's really the function of my team, Stefan. And I think that it was a really big discussion when we were first starting this team. Where does this team live? Is this a PR function? Is this a marketing function? Is this an HR function? I felt very passionately, and I will be eternally grateful to my boss, Cindy Ross, who is the president and chief talent officer, or chief people officer. I will be eternally grateful that she and I really agreed that this is an HR function, because at the end of the day, the people experience has to align to who is responsible for the people. Right? Mm-hmm. And HR owns the employee experience. And so when you start looking at, well, how do you resource a team? How do you get budget? How do you get headcount? If this team sat in corporate marketing, who are great partners of mine and I align with very closely, and I know that my success and their success are inextricably wound together. But if the function of my team sat in corporate marketing, it would always be a lower priority, because the first priority of marketing is going to always be to drive leads. And that by nature means that the employee experience is getting put in the back seat. Whereas if you build a team like this and you build it into the HR silo, to use your word, then you're aligning to where the dollars, the resources, the efforts, all of the concerted energy, everything is going into creating a great employee experience. And it makes it pretty easy then to focus on the job at hand. And to your original part of the question is, it creates consistency because it's all in one part of the org. Mm-hmm. So everyone owns the culture as it relates to how we live it out every day. That is not an HR function. But as it relates to creating a consistent experience from before you were even thinking about applying for a job at Salesforce, but just happened to hear that it was a good place to work, to your 15th anniversary in the company and advocating and recruiting more people into it, everything around that life cycle is really the function of my team.
So how do you see the HR function evolving in the next 5-10 years?
Well, I am no futurist, and I do not have a crystal ball, but if I was to give you some just straight shooting Jody Kohner opinions, I would say that data will play a huge role, more and more. People analytics and how you're talking and thinking about your employees will need to really come from solid data strategies. I think outside of that, though, when you start looking at some of the machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like that are being introduced, I do really think that the function of HR is going to be to cultivate to cultivate better leaders and to really think about what is the EQ of a great leader. Because the machines and the data are certainly going to create a ton of really tactical and technical and brilliant strategies. But the how you interact with your people and the depth of those personal relationships, the capacity to hold great conversations, to have difficult conversations, and to really be present, I think that is going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge. You really can't ever underestimate the importance of well-being and fun and a sincere connectivity in the workplace on the overall culture and, the success of the company at large.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because there's a lot of emphasis and focus on the hard and technical skills right now. But I agree with you. Many futurists see that there will be an even focus on the soft and human EQ skills in the next few years.
I agree. I mean, I think you think about, like, if you take a sales job is a sales job. Anywhere you do it, right? You're going to chase some leads, you're going to negotiate some deals, you're going to try to build a good relationship and earn the renewal. Like, wherever you go, that's what it is. But who you get to do that job with and how you align from a values perspective, that is the secret sauce. That is what everyone is so hungry for. That's how you get the best talent. That's how you keep the best talent when they walk through your door.
One thing that I love discussing when I have guests on the podcast that work for a technology company is the analogy between software development and, I would say, employee engagement, company culture development as well. Meaning that it's a never-ending process. It's all about having a minimal valuable product, testing it with a smaller audience, make some iterations along the way, and keep upgrading and improving the process and the programs. What's your take on this?
Oh, I definitely agree. We're very, very open to piloting new things, trying new ideas. I'm very fortunate to get to work in a company where everyone is so passionate about the culture and that everyone has so many ideas. And we've got 32,000 people pinging us all the time with new ideas of benefits or programs or things we can be doing. And we're very open to that. We love looking at that, trying new things out and seeing what sticks.
So talking about getting employee input, do you have some sort of voice on the employee system, or how do you collect employee inputs or suggestions?
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not like a one-stop shop. It's how we've set up our employee community. There's conversations going on all day long, all across the world in there, where employees are coming up with new ideas. And just like you would mention someone, on Facebook or Twitter, you mention somebody in the group, and those ideas quickly are routed to the correct people to vet them and try to make them work, or to come back and say, hey, we tried it, it didn't work, here's why, and kind of educate everyone in the process so that we're all moving forward quickly and in an aligned fashion.
For those who are listening to us and may not be in HR role, but are mostly interested in joining for Salesforce, what are some of the things that you're looking for in candidates?
Well, one of the things that I think is really fantastic about our culture is how important giving back is. We are very philanthropically oriented. All employees at Salesforce are given 56 hours a year to go out and volunteer in their communities for wherever they want, wherever their heart's passions are. So for me, I spend the bulk of that time in my kids' schools and volunteering there and getting to see them in their new natural habitat. But for others, maybe that's working for the Heart Association or something like that. I think that when we interview people at Salesforce, we're really interested to know, what are you involved in? How are you giving back to your community? We're looking for people who are out there to improve the state of the world, and who are putting their discretionary effort into, giving back and being engaged in something that means something to them. The bonus of that is that we see that when someone's doing that they are already aligned to our values. They already, are putting themselves out there. But it also shows us that these are already by nature some of the people who are willing to go above and beyond. They've already chosen to dedicate a portion of their lives to helping others. And that's just a really phenomenal mentality to have in a company culture.
Before we conclude our discussion for today, let me ask you some fun and more personal questions.
Okay.
If you were to invite someone famous to dinner, who would that be and why?
I would invite Benjamin Franklin. I would invite Benjamin Franklin. I think he's phenomenal. I mean, talk about an innovator. Like, it seems like everything was invented by Benjamin Franklin in one way, shape, or another. I think it would be really great to have him to dinner and to show him where all of those initial ideas landed and how far they came.
How many apps do you have on your phone?
Oh.
Not necessarily an exact number, but is it just a few? Do you have hundreds of apps on your phone?
I mean, I would say maybe not hundreds, but we're in the high tens. I organize them in little folders, and now all the folders are like full, and so it's a problem. Yeah, I have an app issue.
Are you more of a Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn person?
Twitter. You should definitely follow me on Twitter, at Jody Kohner. Follow me on Twitter.
Okay, what was your dream job when you grew up as a kid?
Oh, I was going to be an actress. I was definitely going to be an actress, yes.
Okay. What kind of actress? Drama, comedy?
Oh, comedy. I am one funny person.
Good. What is your favorite vacation spot?
My favorite vacation spot would be probably the Mauna Kea on the Big Island in Hawaii. That beach is just pure bliss.
So when you go on vacation, what is the essential item that you always take with you?
This is an easy one, an eye mask. I need my sleep. I need an eye mask just to make sure that there is no question that it will be dark until I am ready to stop sleeping.
What is your favorite food?
My favorite food. My favorite food is a burger, like a fully loaded burger with egg and bacon and grilled onions and grilled mushrooms, like everything you got back there, put it on that burger.
Any specific brand?
No, fresh.
Okay. What is the way for our listeners to follow you and Salesforce on social media?
Please. So you can follow me at Jody Kohner, JodyKohner. And then I would say you can also follow at Salesforce Jobs is another great one if you're interested in working for us, where you can learn all about our company culture and see some great things that are happening inside.
Any last word of advice or wisdom for our listeners?
I would say to just, take care of your people. If you really focus intently on taking care of your people, they will take care of your business. That is at the heart of all of this. And of course, never underestimate the importance of having fun while you do that. It's those really honest human connections that just make everyone happy.
That's a good way to put it. So thank you so much, Jody, for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for carving out the time for me.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.